What's happening, people? Corruption in boxing here, back after an extended period away. When you're dealing with boxing and you get a little bit disillusioned with the sport, as we all do from time to time, certainly need a period away. But there was a fight which took place yesterday which certainly reinvigorated my desires. A fight I had a very close eye out for a while, as it featured a fighter whose camp I've been interacting with. The fight took place, I don't recall the name of the venue, but it was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A top-ranked card. Top of the bill, Jessie Magdaleno was the American-based Mexican, was defending his WBO 122-pound title for the second time, super bantamweight. And he was up against his mandatory challenger, Isaac Rollstone Dogboe, born in Ghana, but has resided in the United Kingdom since the age of 8. Very interesting character. Trained by his father, Paul Dogboe, former soldier. Certainly implements a very unorthodox style of training. Very minimalistic sparring. Not sure whether he has any other fighters. I know Isaac has a brother, but may just be specifically with Isaac at the moment. Took Isaac to the Olympic Games 2012, represented Ghana. I think he was 17 at the time. So Paul has done well with Isaac given a very limited amount of time, and has now led Isaac to a world championship as well. So a fantastic story. But let's talk about the fight. Now, Magdaleno and Dogboe sparred in Vegas, I think 3 or 4 years ago. I think Isaac was only 3 or 4-0, and Jessie may have been in its 18 or 20-0. I don't recall exactly. Sparring was due to go 10 rounds, but I think it went 5. Isaac, according to the interviews he's done with Ingram, and shout out to Ingram, who's been supporting Isaac from pretty much day one. Isaac appeared to, said he held his own. It was a bit of a stalemate in the end, but the young man certainly had caused an impression on Jessie. So it's pretty ironic they get in the ring now. Isaac, having taken care of Magdaleno's mandatory challenger Cesar Juarez in Ghana last time. Isaac stopping him with a fantastic left hook from an orthodox stance. When was it? 6th round. Before that, he'd fought an Argentinian veteran, Javier Chacon. Stopped him in... All the fight was stopped. Chacon having broken his arm, but he was taking a bit of a pounding at times. But I can't remember whether that was 5 or 6, or that could have been 5, and Cesar Juarez could have been 6. So Isaac had in his last 2 fights stepped up his competition, stopping everybody. So had a a degree of certainly power going into the fight. The fight build-up was marred with just world-class trash talking, certainly from Paul Dogboe, who his father and trainer is very extremely vocal, very brash about his son as a precocious talent. And I think that was a massive factor in the fight. I think Jessie Magdaleno was definitely impacted by the sheer volume of psychological warfare, specifically that Jessie would not engage in the middle of the ring, and that he would resort to running. And I think Magdaleno, that coupled with being out of the ring for about a year, sort of nursing an injury, but he's also had weight issues. Talk was that he was going to move up to, 126. So how the year off has affected him in terms of his preparation, I'm not sure, but he claims he had a very good training camp. So at least it gave his body time to recover, so that he could, and it gave him sufficient time to make the weight. So there can be no complaints if he was feeling a little bit weight drawn. So the fight, Jessie, excuse me, southpaw fighter, likes to rock back on that front foot, pretty explosive, very good puncher. Dogboe, 2 inches smaller at 5'2", very short actually for a bantamweight. Orthodox, very unorthodox in his fighting style, sort of a pressure fighter, brawler, puncher, body puncher, looping punches. That's his style. Hunt you down, stalk you, and dispose of you. But Isaac came out of the gate far too overconfident, showed Jessie no respect. His objective was just trying to walk him down, cart off the rink, and just pound on Jessie with hooks, certainly his left hook. Jessie set a beautiful trap, caught him with like a 3-piece combination, turning to the right as well, one check left hook as well, put Isaac down onto the canvas heavily. It was a massive shock. Paul Dogboe had spoken in the fight build-up as nobody has been able to disrupt Isaac's foundations. He sparred extensively with Oscar Escandon, Carl Frampton as well, Jessie Magdaleno, and with a member of the Dogboe family who's a light heavyweight or something. And Paul Dogboe claims that he was even unable to, sufficiently hurt Isaac. So, we're not sure if there's any truth to that, but Magdaleno certainly did rock him, put Dogboe down heavily. He got up, he was still feeling the effects of the punches. We were all worried then that it could have been a first round stoppage for Jessie. Maybe it was a step too far for the young man, but he survived the first round. And he retaliated. I think that the overconfidence that Jessie, that sort of injection of overconfidence from putting Isaac down, it made Jessie ultimately vulnerable, and that's what happens in boxing. You can get caught cold in the first round when you're not sufficiently warmed up, etc. And conversely, when you've hurt your opponent early, it almost gives you that belief that you're able to hurt him at will throughout the fight, or whenever you elect to step up the pressure. So I think we saw I'm not sure it was the third round in which Jessie, he could have won this fight by resorting to boxing, as he's much the best. He's a much better technical and fundamental fighter, longer, taller as well. If he'd resorted to boxing, sticking and moving, targeting head and body, he could have won this fight a lot easier, but he decided to step in, and you can't really blame him. You want to put on a show as well. You're the A-side fighter, fighting on the top-ranked card. You want to dispose of your opponent. Plus, there was a lot of bad blood as well, so naturally he wanted to retaliate, and what better than to knock out your opponent, to humble him and shut him up. So Jessie actually stepped in with, a left hook, but Isaac caught him with a looping counter right hand. He didn't have to move very much. just made sure his head was down. I'm not even sure if he actually saw the target, but it was a perfectly timed counter right hand, looping right hand, and it hurt Jessie Magdaleno. You know, rocked him to his foundations, went down heavily, and when he got up, took the count, got up, certainly made the 8 count, got up. Referee dusted off his gloves. You could see his eyes were still rolled back. He was hurt badly. There was more than sufficient time left in the round. And Isaac was just teeing off on him. Magdaleno just made the mistake of literally standing stationary on the ropes. Employed almost a turtle shoulder defense. His objective was to cover his head, extend as much as he could, and standing absolutely stationary, just trying to insulate himself from the punches rather than slipping, evading, even using his legs. Maybe he was just so disorientated. So Isaac, in trying to prize openings for headshots, targeted the body. You know, some scintillating right hooks, left hooks to the body. Magdaleno, you know, had no option but to try and protect his body by bringing his hands down, or, you know, partially exposing his head, but bringing his elbows down to try and deflect some of those blows. He was just in an extremely vulnerable position. Isaac, not all of the shots had penetrated Jessie's guard. Some of the hooks, he didn't hook particularly well around the guard. He was just trying to penetrate the guard, but some of the left hands to the body definitely pounded Jessie's body, and it was in retrospect, it was actually a good strategy, certainly for a fighter who may be weight drawn, or certainly documented that he's had weight problems and he's been out of the ring for a sufficient time. So body shots is certainly the better way, and you know, you should never ever abandon the body shot. A fight can end with a body shot at any time, whether it's in the first and the last. So Isaac's vicious and relentless body attack certainly had dividends, and that round in particular, given the knockdown, which equalised Jessie's knockdown in the first, a 10-8. But Isaac was teeing off on Jessie for over, you know, a minute and a half, and you know, you can certainly make the argument that's a 10-7 round. You know, Jessie put up no resistance in terms of offence after being hurt. It was just defence. Isaac was just all over him, swarmed over him, and was just teeing off. So a lot of the middle rounds, Jessie was pretty much on the back foot. He was just surviving the rounds, landing the occasional left-right hands. You know, Manny Robles was getting extremely animated. Dogboe, it was an argument where he was not going to punch himself out, but you know, the young man showed amazing endurance and stamina, you know, throughout the fight. His work rate didn't really significantly reduce. Fatigue didn't really set in. At times he was breaking range just to assess the target, but then he would come back with another assault. So he did show a little bit of patience, a couple of touch shot jabs, but Dogboe in general, because he's short, he's only 5'2", you know, didn't set up a lot of power punches with a jab. Probably given that it, you know, he would be countered, given that he's short, doesn't have a long reach. Jessie's probably has the better movement as well, although Isaac is, you know, extremely athletic. You know, he had a long time playing football before, so certainly enough certainly has the ability to move. But eventually Jessie, surviving a lot of the middle rounds, got his second wind, and was able to retaliate in some of the mid to late rounds. I think he may have won maybe one of the mid to late rounds. When he started boxing a little bit, catching Isaac, who was a little bit reckless at times, and he showed that against the Javier Chacon when he's just firing, looping left-hand hooks. He can certainly go off balance, and he'll step in too much with a straight right hand as well. Very, very little regard to his defense. So when he's firing those punches, if they're missing wildly, then it puts him in the prime position to be countered. And Jessie can counter a little bit. He was firing those bolo left hooks to Isaac's body, and some of those punches were definitely shaking up Isaac a little bit. So Jesse's power was still carrying throughout the fight, but the problem was he was just being broken down head and body. The vicious body attack, was paying massive dividends. It was slowing Jesse's work rate. He didn't have sufficient energy in his legs to keep to evade Isaac. He made the I wouldn't say a fundamental error, but maybe it was just a case of pain and fatigue. That's a fatal combination together when you're just languishing on the ropes far too much. And Manny Robles was shouting insistently for him to get off the ropes, and it was definitely the right call. But it's difficult when you're facing that barrage of punches. So eventually Isaac put him down on the canvas 2 more times. The first time, combination, he actually punched through the guard. So at that stage, Jesse's punch resistance was it was sparse. He was just battered and worn down. Had no real strength. And the second and final knockdown in the, I can't even remember if it was the 10th or the 11th. It was just a short left hand, nothing significant, no real power on it. But Jessie just crumbled to the counter. It was just merely a case of waving the white flag. He didn't want any more punishment. So Isaac had, all of the prognostications. Certainly ESPN were doubting his chances at the very start, which were extremely wide with the bookies as well. But he had that indomitable level of confidence throughout. Isaac has aspirations of being a pastor, so he had no doubts that victory would be attained. And at 23 years old, it's a fantastic achievement. I think he becomes Ghana's youngest world champion. He's met all of the dignitaries. Zuma Nelson was at his fight with Javier Chacon as well. The professor. Isaac, is carrying that legacy. Absolutely delighted for the young man. Paul Dogboe and his publicist Melissa I've spoken with as well. It's a great story. Hopefully I'm going to try and get an interview with Isaac as well. Once they return to London, I'll get in touch with his publicist. I'm sure she'll have no problems. Was it a case of Jessie Magdaleno just remaining at 122 pounds a little one fight too much. There is an argument about that, but I think a rematch, Bob, it was a fantastic fight, with knockdowns, and I'm sure Bob Arum will, if a rematch clause isn't already, incorporated within the contract, I'm sure Bob will be able to negotiate a rematch. He'll offer Isaac, a significantly higher purse as the champion. ESPN again as well, so the biggest boxing network. Interesting to see what the television views were for the fight, but it certainly caught the attention widespread as well. Had good feedback throughout, boxing publications, boxing journalists throughout, so definitely that's the sort of coverage and feedback you're looking for if you're a young champion. So, and Isaac, as he's a road warrior. He's fought 6 times in the United States. He's fought in New Zealand, in Europe, in Asia. He's been on that WBO African title, WBO Asian, WBO Intercontinental, WBA Interim, and now WBA full and official 122-pound super bantamweight champion of the world. So, that's what you call forging a career, forging a path in accordance with one sanctioning body. Given the injection of confidence with his already existing confidence, then he'll be calling out everybody, and he's a fighter who I think will fight anyone, anywhere, period. He's determined, he's articulate, he still wants to finish his degree in sociology, or and he's young, he's got time, but he doesn't have the height, so I'm not sure whether he's going to be able to go through the ranks, so, which is not a bad thing if he can remain, at 122 and clear up that division, something that we rarely see in boxing. I think that would be a better way to forge, your legacy if you're able to, so, but a rematch here, hopefully. That'll be an excellent fight as well, but it's dependent on Jessie. He's certainly vulnerable to the head and body as well, so it's dependent on him. I wouldn't be surprised if Jessie moved up to 126, but it will probably come down to money. How much money will Bob offer him for a rematch, as opposed to what his chances are of getting a final eliminator, or even a world title shot straight away at 126. But Bob Arum has a number of champions and matchmakers throughout. So yeah, fantastic fight. Absolutely delighted, overjoyed with the victor, Isaac Dogboe. Great for the continent of Africa as well. Yeah, not much more I can say. So, yeah, corruption in boxing, transmission over.